It started on a morning, no warning, no phone call. I heard the elevator chime, and when the doors opened, my son, Evan, stepped out, with his wife Tessa and her parents trailing behind, all dragging suitcases, as if my penthouse were a hotel. "We're here," Tessa announced, smiling wide. Her parents moved straight past me, admiring the view. "It's even bigger than we imagined." Evan didn't waste time. He set his bags down, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Take the guest room, Mom, or move out." I thought he was joking. I laughed, small and uncertain, but his face stayed still cold, serious, practiced. "Excuse me," I asked quietly. He sighed, as if the situation tired him. "Tessa's parents need a place while their house is being remodeled. You've got space." "It's only fair, I repeated. In my home, Tessa slid an arm around his waist and smiled. "It's temporary," she said sweetly. "But if it's too much trouble, it's fine if you're gone by the weekend." Her grin was sharp, rehearsed. I had designed hundreds of rooms in my life, but I'd never seen cruelty arranged so neatly across a face. The words didn't come. I just nodded once, feeling the air thin around me. I watched as they rolled their luggage toward the master suite, the one I'd built after my husband died, the one that had been my only sanctuary. In the kitchen, her mother opened my refrigerator. Her father asked about repainting the living room. It was as if I'd already disappeared. I took the guest room that night without protest. The walls were beige, the air stale, the window facing another building's brick side. Still, I unpacked a single suitcase, folded my clothes neatly, and sat on the edge of the narrow bed. "So I left," I whispered to the empty room. But even then, I knew it wouldn't be me who lost everything. Just a few days later, that grin of hers would vanish, and panic would take its place. By morning, the air in the penthouse had changed. It wasn't my coffee brewing anymore. It was Tessa's mother's, something too sweet that clung to the kitchen long after she left it. The cabinets were open, dishes stacked in the wrong places, drawers rearranged. My careful order had become their playground. Tessa stood in the middle of the kitchen, one hand on her hip, holding paint samples against the wall. "I'm thinking something lighter," she said to her mother. "Maybe soft cream or off-white. It'll make the space feel new." Her mother nodded, approving. "It needs fresh energy. Fresh energy." That's what people said before they replaced everything that once mattered. Evan walked in, rubbing his neck. "Let them do their thing," Mommy said, not meeting my eyes. "It's just until we get settled." "Settled," I repeated. "Of course." I stood by the counter while they planned their new home. They moved through my kitchen like they owned it, touching things, claiming space. My favorite blue vase was pushed aside to make room for Tessa's candle holder. The framed photo of Evan as a boy had been moved to a lower shelf, out of sight. They weren't stealing. Not exactly. They were rewriting the story of the place one object at a time, until I barely recognized it. Tessa smiled at me that afternoon as she poured herself a glass of juice. "You're so lucky to still have a room here," she said. "Most mothers wouldn't get that." I didn't answer. I just pressed my hands against the cool countertop, feeling the weight of her words. Lucky. That was how they saw me. When evening came, I retreated to the guest room. The laughter from the living area carried through the thin walls, muffled but constant. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring into the dark, realizing what my silence had built. It wasn't peace, it was permission, and I had given it freely. By the third day, I began to recognize the pattern. Evan spoke to me like a tenant who'd overstayed her welcome, not the woman who'd built his foundation. Every word from him carried the tone of management, firm, detached, rehearsed. "Mom, we just need stability right now," he said over breakfast, pouring coffee into the mug I'd bought for his graduation. "You've had this place to yourself for years. It's time to think about what's best for the family." Family. His favorite word when he wanted to take something. I stirred my own cup, careful not to let my voice tremble. You mean what's best for your family? He sighed. You make everything sound like a transaction. It was almost funny. Transactions had built this penthouse. I'd sold my first home to pay his tuition, skipped 2 Christmases to finish design projects that funded his first apartment. Every square inch of this place existed because I'd believed in him. Tessa appeared from the hallway, rubbing her stomach. We've been thinking, she began softly. Once the baby comes, this space will be perfect for a nursery. I looked between them. Evan nodded, already seeing it in his mind. The master suite, my sanctuary, repainted and filled with cribs and toys that would never be mine to touch. They weren't asking permission. They were simply informing me. I listened quiet, letting their words wash over me like static. But something in me shifted the same way foundations shift before a house begins to crack. Of course, I said, finally rising from the table. You should do what you need. That night, I stood in the narrow guest room, the hum of the city just beyond the window. My fingers traced the frame of the door, the only boundary I still owned. I had spent a lifetime building for others' homes' futures' comfort, but builders know when a structure can't be saved. I closed the door behind me, and for the first time I started planning what would come next. By the 4th morning, the guest room already felt like exile. The air was still heavy with dust and silence. From the hallway came the faint sound of laughter. Tessa's parents arguing playfully about curtain fabrics, the kind of domestic noise that used to comfort me. Now it only reminded me that I was no longer part of the picture. Boxes had appeared outside my door overnight, stacked high enough to block part of the frame. When I stepped out, I noticed my house key was gone from the wall hook near the entryway. My coat had been moved to the storage closet, folded neatly as if I'd already left. I found Tessa in the kitchen, holding a mug that wasn't hers. We thought we'd make more space for the baby, she said, smiling like she'd done me a kindness. Of course I managed. The words felt foreign. She turned back to the stove, humming softly as she stirred oatmeal. My coffee mug, my favorite one, the one Evan gave me after my company's first contract, was nowhere to be seen. When I returned to the guest room, I stood in the narrow space and looked around. The beige carpet, the tiny window facing a brick wall, the single lamp flickering slightly. It was a fitting picture of what they thought I'd become. That evening, while the rest of the apartment buzzed with conversation and the smell of dinner I hadn't been invited to share, I pulled out my old briefcase from beneath the bed. Inside, under layers of sketches and invoices, was a black folder labeled simply, Holdings. I opened it carefully, each page, a reminder of who I truly was. The property deed, the LLC registration, bank transfers, receipts for every fixture and piece of art in this penthouse. Every line bore my name, not his. I didn't pack clothes. I packed proof. As dawn seeped through the blinds, I slipped the documents into my bag. The city outside was waking, but so was I. I had spent too long living small. That part of me ended with sunrise. Day 5 began before sunrise. I brewed my coffee in the small kitchenette off the guest room, the only corner of the penthouse that still felt untouched. The rest of the space sounded different. Now footsteps that weren't mine, voices too comfortable in the home I had built. I opened my laptop on the narrow desk and pulled up the Ashton Holdings records. Years ago, I had formed the company to protect my design firm's profits and real estate. Every property, every fixture, every piece of furniture in this penthouse was purchased through that entity, mine entirely. What had once been a precaution for business was now my shield against family. One by one, I reviewed the digital deeds, cross-checking serial numbers and invoices. Chandeliers, art, the imported marble counters, all legally tied to Ashton Holdings, LLC. The clarity steadied me. By 8, I was on the phone with Ms. Patel, my attorney. I'd like to review my property agreements, I said. Her tone sharpened immediately. Everything all right, Ms. Ashton. Everything's perfect, I replied. But it's time to make a few adjustments. We scheduled for 9 the next morning. I printed the confirmation email and slipped it into the black folder with my deeds. By noon, I passed Tessa's parents in the hallway tape measures around their necks. We're thinking new curtains for the suite, her mother said brightly. I smiled, calm and unbothered. You should choose whatever feels right. They nodded, pleased by my cooperation, unaware that the walls they planned to decorate would soon no longer be theirs to stand inside. That evening, I ate dinner alone in the guest room, a quiet rhythm returning to my pulse. Every decision I'd made, every document I'd signed years ago, had built this moment. I no longer felt cornered. I felt positioned. As I set my phone alarm for dawn, I glanced toward the folder resting on the chair beside me. Tomorrow, the correction would begin, not loud, not dramatic, but precise. They thought they'd taken everything. They'd soon learn I'd been the one holding it all along. Day 6 began in the polished quiet of Ms. Patel's office downtown. The walls were lined with framed degrees, their sharp edges gleaming in the morning light. I laid the folder on her desk and exhaled for what felt like the first time all week. Ms. Patel flipped through the papers with practiced precision. You were smart to structure everything this way, she said, tapping one of the deeds. Every property furnishing and fixture belongs solely to Ashton Holdings, LLC. Legally, you are the owner of it all. I nodded. And the lease you can terminate it at any time. It's under your entity, not your name. Evan has no claim. I didn't hesitate. Do it. She looked up. Effective immediately. Yes. She smiled slightly, understanding more than I said aloud. I'll file the notice and notify management. You'll receive confirmation by tomorrow morning. By the time I left her office, the sun had risen over the Chicago skyline, turning glass towers gold. My reflection in the window looked calm, colder maybe, but calm. That afternoon, I sat at my desk and began cutting the final threads. The joint account was the first to go frozen. The auto payments rerouted to a separate business account. The building manager was next. There will be a change in occupancy soon, I told him. Please ensure all communications go directly to me. He hesitated. Everything all right, Ms. Ashton? Everything's in order, I said. By nightfall, the Penthouse came alive on my security feed. Evan had invited guests laughing, drinking, posing in front of the view I'd spent years earning. My dishes, my linens, my wine all part of the show. I didn't call. I didn't drive back. I just hit record. The laughter echoed faintly through my laptop speakers like background noise to a story already ending. When the apartment emptied and silence returned, I wrote a single note to Ms. Patel and scheduled it for morning delivery. Subject proceed as planned. Then I closed my laptop, turned off the light, and finally let myself sleep. Day 7 began with a call I didn't need to answer. Mom Evan said, his tone already sharp. The power company says there's some kind of billing issue. The service is under your name. Can you fix it? I sipped my coffee and kept my voice steady. Then pay the bill, Evan. A pause. I tried. My card's not working. That sounds inconvenient, I said, and ended the call before he could say more. By afternoon, the messages multiplied. Missed calls, texts, one from Tessa written in all caps. What did you do? We can't access anything. I didn't respond. That evening, another call came through Tessa. This time, her voice high and shaking. We know you have money hidden somewhere. The inheritance Evan said your parents left you a trust. You've been hoarding it while we struggle. There it was, the truth of it. Not just greed, but entitlement. They hadn't simply taken my home. They'd rewritten the story, so I was the thief, and they were the victims. I let her finish shouting before I spoke. There is no inheritance, I said quietly. You've already lived off everything I earned." Her voice cracked. "You're lying." I hung up. The silence afterward was cleaner than any apology could have been. I turned back to my desk and opened the email from Ms. Patel. Attached were the final documents confirming termination of the lease and transfer of all assets into secure storage. A single signature stood between me and freedom. I signed it. Outside, the city hummed with the rhythm of people who believed their foundations were solid. I knew better. Every structure, homes, families, marriages, eventually showed its cracks. When the confirmation notice pinged in my inbox, I opened my planner and checked the final line of my list. Movers, Saturday, 8 a.m. I closed the book and leaned back in my chair. Everything was ready. Saturday morning arrived crisp and bright, 1 week since they'd come through my door. At 8 sharp, 3 moving trucks lined the curb outside the building. The attorney and the building manager met me in the lobby, clipboards in hand. "Remove only what's mine," I said. They nodded. The orders were clear. By 9, the hallways echoed with footsteps and the steady rhythm of rolling dollies. Each item had been tagged and cataloged in advance: artwork, furniture, lighting fixtures. The imported coffee machine that had once been my morning ritual. Everything documented, everything traceable. Upstairs, I could hear the first sounds of confusion. A door slammed. Evan's voice called down the hallway. "Mom, what's going on?" I didn't look up from the checklist in my hands. "Following your advice," I said, when he appeared in the doorway barefoot and disheveled. "You told me to move out." His eyes darted between the movers wrapping the dining table and the attorney overseeing the inventory. "You can't take everything." "We live here?" "Not anymore," I replied. "Everything in this unit was purchased by Ashton Holdings. You'll find receipts for each piece." Tessa appeared next, pale and furious, her robe slipping from one shoulder. "You can't just, this is insane." Her mother's voice rose from the kitchen, demanding explanations, waving her hands toward the chandeliers now being lowered from the ceiling. I reached into my folder and handed Evan the documents. Ownership details, transfer authorizations, and the termination notice for the lease. "The building manager will expect your keys by Monday." Evan stared at the papers as if they were written in another language. "You planned this." "I built this," I corrected. By noon, the trucks were full. The apartment that once held my life and now their arrogance stood stripped to its bones. The walls echoed with a hollow quiet that no one dared break. I walked toward the elevator without looking back. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of them standing in the empty space surrounded by nothing but the sound of their own disbelief. It didn't take long for everything to collapse. 3 days after I left, the building manager called. "We've had to post the eviction notice," he said quietly. "They refused to leave." "I expected as much," I replied. By the end of the week, the paper hung crooked on the penthouse door, a single sheet that ended months of entitlement. Evan called once, but I let it ring. He sent messages after that, apologies tangled with excuses. But silence was the only answer I owed him. The scandal spread quickly. Word reached his firm that he'd been living off property he didn't own, forging his reputation on someone else's work. By Monday, he'd lost his job. Tessa's parents packed up and left for New Jersey, their pride as broken as their plan. I imagined them driving away in quiet resentment, blaming me for the mess they'd made of themselves. The penthouse, my penthouse, stood empty for the first time in years. No voices, no footsteps, no false laughter. Just light moving across bare walls. I walked through it once more, before handing the keys to a young couple who'd answered the rental listing. "It's the most peaceful space we've ever seen," the woman said. I smiled. "It is now." I left the city before sunset, the skyline fading behind me. The highway north stretched open and clean, the kind of road that doesn't demand anything from you. The lake house was small, built decades ago, but solid. I spent the first evening unpacking only what I needed: coffee maker, notebooks, sketch pads. For the first time in a long time, I slept through the night without waking to someone else's noise. Days passed quietly. Mornings began with coffee and the sound of water against the dock. No calls, no requests, no guilt. Then one morning, the postman left a single envelope on my porch, forwarded from my city address. The handwriting stopped me cold, familiar loops, a name I hadn't seen written to me in years. Months passed before I finally opened the letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. Evans. Still the same uneven scrawl he'd used to write birthday cards when he was little. I unfolded the page carefully, though my hands didn't shake. Mom, please. We made a mistake. We need your help. No apology. No reflection. Just need. I read it once, twice, then set it down beside my new business cards. Ashton Design and Restoration. A quiet company built from my name alone this time. No partners, no dependencies, no one waiting to claim credit. Just me and the work. Outside, the lake glimmered beneath a thin layer of mist. The world was waking gently, the way I always wished it would. I brewed my coffee, listening to the familiar hum of the kettle and the soft rustle of trees outside the open window. The air here smelled like wood and water, not ambition. At my drafting table, I opened my sketchbook to a blank page. My hand moved instinctively, drawing shapes that had nothing to do with clients or deadlines. Curves of light, open spaces, rooms designed for quiet. I was building something again, but this time, it was only for me. When I looked up, the reflection in the glass caught my eye. The woman staring back wasn't the one who'd stood in that penthouse doorway, stunned and small. She looked steady, grounded, whole. I glanced once more at the letter now resting beneath my pen. The words had lost their power. They wanted me gone, I said softly, a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. So I left and took the foundation with me. Outside, the sunlight spilled across the lake, and for the first time in years, the space I lived in felt perfectly designed.